Paul Manafort's trial began last week, and because I can pretty much guarantee you that the media and the president are going to focus on the wrong narrative throughout this entire trial, we're going to miss something really important, because the president and the media have the same problem. They suffer from something I call the conflations. The conflations. It's a nasty illness that has taken our capital city over. The president, not wanting to have his election look in any way tarnished, conflates anything to do with Russian aggression with collusion. The media is doing the same thing, except in their case, they're doing it for the exact opposite reasons, to make his campaign appear illegitimate by, pushing collusion. The conflations on both sides. It is forcing us to miss the true threat here, and that is the Russian aggression on a scale not seen since the Cold War. But it's also making everyone miss a real issue at the heart of the Paul Manafort case, and that is Washington, D.C. lobbyists are out of control. Manafort is just one of over 24,000 registered and shadow lobbyists operating to influence our government. It is a $6 billion industry. Let me say that again, $6 billion. Lobbying activity hit its highest level in 2017 over the last 8 years. Now, this is the definition of the swamp, and we can give credit to President Trump when he said this on the campaign trail.
I've watched the politicians. I've dealt with them all my life. They're controlled fully by the lobbyists, by the donors, and by the special interests. It's destroying our country.
Okay, he's right. But we have to immediately take that credit away from him, because he immediately turned right around and hired Paul Manafort to be his campaign chairman. But it gets worse than that. He has maybe unknowingly done something else on one of his big initiatives that is pretty staggering. We'll get to that here in a second. I personally don't think that Trump, was hiring Paul Manafort because he was trying to get some evil dude in there. I think, he's not sometimes necessarily the best judge of character when it came to Roger Stone and others. And Roger Stone and Paul Manafort used to be great. You could even, make a case that Donald Trump heard, Paul Manafort, oh yeah, he worked for Reagan. But Paul Manafort is one of the notorious lobbyists, not only in our country, but the world. And if you want to see how shady this business is, you don't really need to look much further than the indictment on Manafort. He's been a lobbyist and political consultant for decades, in addition to working on the presidential campaigns of Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Bob Dole. He has also lobbied on behalf of, let's call them some questionable figures. Leaders like the now deposed former president of the Ukraine. And here's where Manafort got caught up in the Mueller probe. The charges against Manafort allege that he made more than $60 million working in the Ukraine. He then routed that cash through a shady bank in Cyprus and set up a shell company or two, disguised the money as loans from those phony companies, and the rest is history. Doing it this way helped him avoid U.S. taxes. It's also illegal, but who's looking at that? Manafort's dealings with shady foreign leaders are well documented. They include the former leader of Zaire, an Angolan guerrilla leader, and the dictator of the Philippines. So that's great. Lobbyists like Manafort use their political influence and their know-how in the United States to sell that to the highest bidder to help them shape our policies here in the U.S. Now, the conflations syndrome will instantly tie this to Trump and to the GOP. But this is much, much, much larger than that. It reaches across all political and ideological sides. And in the world of lobbying, really, there's only one ideology, and that is greed. For instance, a Bernie supporter, a Hillary supporter, and a Trump supporter all walk into a bar. Is there any way this joke doesn't end up with, throwing of fists? Yeah, there is. Only one. And that's if all three were Washington, D.C. lobbyists. And this is the exact scenario surrounding Manafort and his work in the Ukraine. Three people that shouldn't agree on anything politically were all helping to elect the now deposed Ukrainian president. Tad Devine, he was the chief strategist for Bernie Sanders. He also worked on the presidential campaign for both Al Gore and John Kerry. He's been named now as a witness in the Manafort case. Why? Because he was helping Manafort in 2010 on the Ukraine. Devine also has worked on elections in Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Ireland, and Honduras. Another big name that was revealed in the Manafort case is Tony Podesta. Now, he's the brother of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's right-hand man. His firm, the Podesta Group, was actually hired by Manafort to lobby for the agenda of the Ukrainian president. Now, think about that for a second. Tony Podesta was hired by a known Republican political operative, lobbied for a Ukrainian agenda supported by Russia, and the Russians would then hack his brother to hurt his candidate just a few months later. Thanksgiving at the Podesta home is probably a little rough. But Podesta's foreign lobbying goes way back. He was employed by the Egyptian government to lobby for Mubarak back in 2007. Podesta, a Democrat, was joined by Bob Livingston. Now he's a Republican. Political rivals? Yes, and both willing to represent Egypt on our soil, all in the name of greed. The conflations syndrome.